channel. So the live stream is already there, and we will wait for a moment. And I think there are already some of participants that's already joined.
Oh yes, we have someone else that has joined the chat. Welcome.
Yeah.
Okay,
Welcome,
so
and so because this is the first webinar, and I forget where is my key. Oh my god.
okay, so it's 6:14. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll start the conversation proper. I can promise you guys in the audience today that is going to be a pretty interesting kickoff to what we call the OPAI series, or Ordinary People Achieving Impact. And yeah, it's 6:15 already. You guys want to start? Okay, fantastic. Let's do it. The recording has started.
Can we wait for 2 minutes more, little bit?
Oh, you're waiting for a couple of people coming in?
Yes, exactly. Because there are some people that already email us, and I try to reply for them so they can join us.
Sure. So for the people in the audience, just to reiterate a little bit, the way that today's session is going to go is that we will be introducing the two speakers of the day. They'll be talking a little bit more about their work in the social enterprise space. After that, we'll be having a little bit of a conversation about how their philosophies are with regards to ordinary people achieving impact. We'll be unpacking what those things mean. We also have the flexibility to answer questions from the audience. There's a Q&A tab at the bottom of Zoom. If at any point in time you have a question, I'll be keeping a very, very close eye on those questions and I'll be sure to get to them, right? So if we could give it, Vantri, is 1 more minute, okay, before we start? Okay, 1 more minute. Also, in the meantime, especially for those that has just entered, I know that the chat doesn't work between participants, but if you could actually tell us in the panel, like who you are, where you're from, what you're doing, that would be really nice, actually. Also, you could mention whether or not you want us to share your presence in this webinar as well. If you don't want us to do, it's fine as well. I'm going to quickly get a glass of water because this is going to be a long conversation. Give me 1 second.
Okay, we can start, I think, Irshad.
Irshad's
Oh yeah, having a water. So we will wait, and
we'll start when he gets back.
Everyone, that we will also have another session of webinar after 2 weeks, and we will send you guys the information after this. And if you guys is interested to know more about our next webinar, it will be about diversity. And also I a little bit forget about the next one. And in meantime of the event, we will also give you this kind of information. And also, if there are people that cannot join, we already have streaming in our YouTubes, and it will be also shared to you guys in the end of the session. So if you want to see back and know more. And after the session, we also will give you a chance to asking a question. So please be mind to raise your hand in the process, and you also can asking the question in the chat rooms. Okay, so I give it back to Irshad.
Nice. Alrighty, so let's start the conversation right here, right now. So, hello everyone. Thanks so much for taking this evening off to actually join us on a conversation about ordinary people achieving impact, or OPAI for short. So just a little bit of background as to why we're doing this webinar in the first place. So, um, basically, where the three of us met. Oh, maybe I should introduce the three of us first. So, my name is Irshad. I'm from Singapore. I run an organization called Young Sustainable Impact Southeast Asia. I'll be serving as the moderator as well as the MC for today. Today, we also have two very, very special guests who I've actually met, or two of us actually met in a program called the Changemaker Exchange in China. So Daniel actually runs an organization called Native, and Ivandri runs an organization called Indexa Law. So Daniel's from Malaysia and Ivandri is from Indonesia. And one of the things that actually came up during the conversations that we had while we were spending, how many days was it? 5 days, 4 days? 5 days, yeah. So we were spending 5 days together in China. We never knew each other beforehand. And one of the things that came up in conversations, this whole idea of, so we are a bunch of people that can be considered social entrepreneurs, but what about the rest? Like, what precludes them from actually creating an impact, and why are the social entrepreneurs that are the ones that are put on the pedestal, whereas everyday people that are doing good things, achieving impact somehow, like what are ways that we could do something about, not just like giving them more airtime, whatever that means, but also like how do we recognize the work that they do and how do we actually empower more people to do such work. So that's the seed of how the conversation kind of started. It actually rested in our heads for about 6-7 months after that. And then all of a sudden, eventually kind of came out and like, hey, let's do a webinar series. And both of us were like, okay. And from there, what actually came out of that planning process was a very interesting set of conversations that will be happening from now all the way until late August, early September. Is that right, Vandri?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's pretty much how this came about. And one of the things that we will be doing as a result of all these conversations is actually to synthesize some of the things that were talked about during the session, as well as to synthesize some of our own thoughts that we've been thinking about over the past 6 to 7 months. At the end of these conversations, what's going to happen is that we'll be creating a toolkit that will provide a little bit of a guide for anyone who wants to create some sort of an impact anywhere, like whether it's where they live or elsewhere. So how exactly that toolkit is going to come about, and this is the best part about this series of conversations that we're going to have. We don't actually have a full idea of what that toolkit is going to entail. We have we have a bunch of things that we want to include, but we do actually want to not just kind of look at articles online and just like consolidate all these different frameworks that are out there. We wanted a little bit more. And as a result, what would come out of these conversations are interesting anecdotes, interesting approaches that people have taken in order to empower other people to create impact or to join other people to create impact. And that's what we are here today for. And in order to kickstart this conversation, Daniel and Ivandri have actually prepared a little small something for you guys, like a deck of slides each, where they'll be talking a little bit more about their work, specifically in like Malaysia and Indonesia first. And then after that, what we're going to do is that we're going to dig not just into their work, but also into their underlying philosophies as to why they're doing what they do, what they feel about everyone else either doing the same thing or what could ordinary people, whatever that means, do in order to achieve some sort of impact. So without further ado, I'll be passing the time over to Daniel, who will be talking about his organization first. Yep, Daniel, take it away.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Irshad. Give me a second to... Oh, I can't share my screen. It says
You can.
It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Oh,
Already, please try to
okay,
share.
okay, cool. It works now.
Okay, cool.
Nice.
Okay.
Oh my, your face, guys.
Yeah. So I know that Irshad said I'd be sharing about my organization, which I will. But I think given the context of this talk, I also wanted to share about like my experience as a person going through the journey of trying to create impact. So to add a little bit on top of the story that Irshad mentioned, this webinar series is called Ordinary People Achieving Impact, but previously we talked about it in the context of ordinary person attempting impact, where it was really where I shared about my journey of, going from being a student to being an adult in my career, or sort of an adult trying to make a difference. So I wanted to share like my experience with that and how it relates to the topic. So just a quick introduction about myself. I am the founder of an organization here in Malaysia called Native, where we work with indigenous people, or locally known as the Orang Asli, to set up community-based tourism ventures, where we bring guests into their communities to have meaningful experiences with them to better understand their culture, as well as generate an alternative source of income for them. I'm also part of another organization called EPIC, which ironically stands for Extraordinary People Impacting Communities, which is kind of where the whole OPAI thing derives from, fun fact. So what EPIC does is we create opportunities for everyday people to go on service experiences, where we mobilize volunteers to do things like build homes, and that's really the foundation of our work. So professional credentials aside, I am originally from Penang Island, which is a small town on the west coast of Malaysia. And I only came to KL, or Kuala Lumpur, which is our capital city, when I was about 19 years old for university. And that's really where my whole social impact journey began. So sometime throughout university, I studied civil engineering under massive conservative Asian parent pressure, where my elder sister is a doctor, my brother's a lawyer, and my other sister's an accountant. But throughout that whole process of studying, I started to feel very ordinary. I felt like, I got to be special in some way. Sorry about that. So on that note, I started looking for opportunities to explore beyond what I had in front of me. So I discovered EPIC at the time. It was called EPIC Homes, where you would pretty much jump on a bus with a bunch of strangers and go on a journey to go to an indigenous people's village to build a home in 3 days. So I went for that and I felt very empowered by it. I felt like, oh, this is special. I'm meeting people who I would normally not meet. I'm doing something good. So it kind of really helped me build some confidence that actually I am in a position to make an impact. I am able to make a difference. And that whole feeling of being ordinary started to fade away. But at some point on one particular trip, I also so happens on the way to the village, I sat on the bus next to the founder of EPIC. So his name is Johnson. I think some of you might be familiar with him in the Bosch Alumni Network. And from there, I told him, hey, like I feel that I want to do more than just be a volunteer. So we started exploring ways we could work together, and eventually I found myself going to an Orang Asli village by myself, and was located pretty close to my university. And from there, like I had my first real encounter with the Orang Asli as people, and not so much as beneficiaries, in the sense that, I used to look at them as I'm doing charity. But in this case, I really sat down, I spoke to them, I got to understand them. And over time, like I had this thought that, my university at the time did a lot of charity work, but it was very discoordinated. It was really all over the place, and it was really one time. So what I wanted to do was to organize everyone to come to one central place, or at least one community, and try to make a big difference there. Like small steps add up. So it was, this happened over the span of like 2-3 years, where I tried convincing like my friends of friends to come with me, go to the village and try to, at the time, the only thing I knew how to do was build a home. So that's pretty much what we wanted to do. But for the first year, it didn't really work out. Like people thought that, you're trying to do something weird, it's not going to work. But, in Malay here, we have a saying that translates into effort stirs success, which is pretty much where if you keep trying, eventually something will happen. And eventually we got around to building a home for one particular person named Faisal. And this picture is pretty much the home that we built together over time. And from there, that's really when when I graduated, I ended up joining Epic as a staff member, and eventually I started Native. And that really gets me thinking about how, on the left, it's when I set up a booth sometime in university, sometime in about 2016, to try to convince people to come with me to this village. And this was sometime last year when I went for a pitch for Native, and we won some funding in Singapore. And it really made me reflect about how within a 3-year span from someone who really didn't know anything, who thought about things a certain way, I am somewhat a bit further. I wouldn't say I have things figured out, but I feel like I understand things a little better. And when I think about that, I think about all the marginalized people I have met. So throughout my work, I've had the opportunity to sit down with, I would say literally like hundreds of different people to really get to know them. And I realized how much of my journey is really enabled by them. Like, of course, they are people who are in need. There are things that they need, but there's a lot that they have to give as well. And I feel like my whole career is something that, in a way, is something that they've helped me build as well. And I feel like this is a gift that I could not really repay, no matter how much, like, how many homes that we build, or no matter how much work we do with them in Native. And that really made me think about how we choose our lenses in how we view people. So on the left is a picture of Faisal. So that home I showed earlier, this was him on the first day I met him. I took a picture of him in front of his half-built home, which we eventually helped him finish. And on the right is a picture of him when he was hosting with us as our first Native host. And even then, when I think about it, like, Native really only was able to exist because he said yes to trying to work out something with me. So that raises the question, like, is someone needy, or do they just need a little bit more to fulfill their potential? And then that also raises a further question, because now we are about a year into the work that we're doing. And this is something that I think about a lot, because the more I speak to the Orang Asli people that we work with, and I've encountered so many, like, it makes me wonder, who is the actual social entrepreneur here? Like, is it me, or is it them, or is it the both of us? Not to say that it couldn't be both. Where technically, without Faisal and without like a bunch of other amazing Orang Asli people I've met, we couldn't really do the work we do. And many of them have raised things like wanting to set up their own operations, wanting to sell things like chickens to support their local school. And these are things that, for me, I've gone for social enterprise talks, social enterprise, whatever. And that's how I know about the concept of it. But for them, it's something that they've never heard about. I had like a 1 hour sit down trying to explain what a social enterprise is to them. And they were like, oh, that's just a business, and you're just using your money a certain way. And that's pretty much what really led me to think about OPAI like a while back. And that really made me think that the difference is only skin deep. I think about it a lot, where if Faisal or anyone else from these communities were brought up in an environment where they spoke English, were able to sell well, then they would really be in my position. They really wouldn't need me. And it's not to say that I don't have a place to play in all of this, but it makes me wonder, how can we empower more people like them to go out there and make a difference on their own, where, it's not tied to me, for example, as a central figure, as the so-called founder of Native. And that really brings to a certain theory of change that we've developed here. And you've probably seen like stuff like this within the social enterprise scene. But the idea is where, in the same way where in Native, we take things that a community undervalues, so whether it's their culture, their forest, and we curate it into a set of activities where we want to demonstrate tangible outputs to the community, where they start earning more money, earning more cash. But the real outcome that we're looking for is that they start to improve their own value in self-identity, where they start to believe, actually, what I'm doing is worth something. Like, my culture is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something just to put on the shelf. And eventually that would transform the narrative of not only what the public talks about them as guests, but also what they tell themselves. Like, I am empowered, I am enabled to do things. And it makes me think about that in the context of everyone else. So whether it's, you're a fruit seller by the side of the road, you're an accountant, you're a waiter, you're a healthcare worker, a big question that gets raised a lot at social enterprise talks in particular, especially by university students, is how can I live an impactful life? How can I create an impact where I am? And many of them fall into this trap where they think like, I gotta go and live in the forest and do all sorts of things with like marginalized groups to make a difference. But I always feel like you can make a difference where you are today. It's not to say that, what you mentioned about going and living with a remote community is bad. I think it has its place. But I feel like that sets the barrier of participation in social impact really high. So like what I'd like to see is a change where, even if you perceive yourself as an ordinary person, you're still in a position to achieve impact. I feel like, in the sense of even migrant workers who travel across the sea to earn a living for their family, I feel like that is impactful, that is powerful. So how can we enable people like that to go the extra mile? And yeah, and that's really all I have to share. So I would leave you all with the question of how can we support more ordinary people in making a difference? And how can we all go that extra mile? Thank you. Back to you, Irshad.
Thanks, Daniel. And wow, that was quite something. And we will be digging a lot more into some of the things that you brought up over the course of this conversation. So just be prepared for me to dig a little bit more into some of those points. Thanks so much for sharing. All right, so we have Daniel who has talked a little bit more about his experiences in his own journey as well as his own social enterprise. So now we'll have Ivandri to give a slightly different perspective, where he'll be talking about the work that he does over in Daksa Law, Indonesia. But yeah, I'll leave it to him to kind of give that introduction. So Ivandri, take it away.
Share my screen. Yeah, because there are so many screens that I can share. Okay. Yeah. So thank you everyone. This will be a small sharing. Ordinary person is achieving systemic impact. That's what I want to tell. And okay, what is the next one? Yes. So yeah, this is a little bit introduction. Like next. Okay, why I really interviewing with the OPAI thing. So outside of the things that we done in index law, so we're focusing to helping the governments and civil society to bring more justice and unjust process to more just process in judicial area and also the regulatory process. We're also seeing that there are so many conditions that I, as a personnel, cannot help in the limitation of index things because yeah, back again, we are a startup focusing to making access for justice for everyone, focus in technology sides, helping governments. But we never go to the grassroots. When we talk with the grassroots also, it's always saying that if we want to achieve some systemic impact, we want to achieve some change in our local area, we need not only from top, but also we need from the bottom. And that's why when I met Daniel last year and get this kind of ordinary people achieving ordinary person attempting an impact. So it's attempting. And I just got reflected like, okay, we need to make sure that there are a process, there are a place. So people is not only attempting for impact, but also achieving that kind of impact. Yeah, that kind of drive in the end led me to this process, this kind of webinar, and also pursue another achievement that I want to done that Indexa cannot do is helping people. It's making people to understand that their life is really important, even though it's in small scale. And will be like a short introductory about what is OPAI in my side. So I see that each person can done change. I totally believe that. And everyone can bring a small change and each impact can multiply. And in the end, it will be change the society. If in my background as a legal lawyer things, it's really focused to making sure that everyone can get a good regulation, can get a great judicial process. It's really top process, but in this OPAI, we're going to the grassroots one. We're going to make sure that we uplifting people. And this is the process that I see that can lead for change. So the first one, we want to make sure that everyone is understand, everyone knows, have a knowledge, have a tools that can bring for the action. And after that, after their action, they can give an impact. In this process, in the end, it will be leading to another persons. So these ordinary persons can become a role models that, okay, in this area I can do, and that person can do. So I can also done something good with this toolkit, with this capacity. So that's what OPAI process that we want to have. And the next one is with things that its knowledge is need codified and being shared. So there are so many people that doing this. There are so many books talking about how to achieve something, how to become a change maker, how to become a person that have impact in your society. There are so many books talking about how to become a social enterprises or social entrepreneur. But in the end, it's still fragmented. And in the hope, in the light of hope that our process, our journey can be codified, and other person journey can be codified and can be as a part of learning process for other persons. It can be helping for another Irshad or another Daniel or another person outside there that want to achieve more and want to bring more for their communities with this knowledge. Because sometimes in my experience, even there are some of problems that happens in my ventures. It's also happened in some of civil society in Jakarta. Or it's also happened in some civil society in Jogja, or even in governments services in Indonesia. So that kind of problems can be solved, but because we don't know, we see that okay, we already broke to our routines. In the end, the time to get a book, even reading some mediums things is hard. So in the light to giving more accessible information that easy understands for people, that's what the key achievement that also we want to bring in this process of OPAI. And also that's this is the last things that I want to share about cognitive empathy, that we want to make sure that everyone is really understanding that change making value is an universal things in their brain. So when I go to, let I say, to Thailand, or I go to Myanmar, Laos, we can talk in different language, but we are in the same mindset of impact. We are in the same mindset to bring change for our local conditions. That's what the cognitive empathy paradigm shift that I as especially as a persona want to bring. So the change making is not only for social enterprise, not only for leaders, but for everyone. I think that's all. I give it back to Irshad. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bandri. And thanks so much for sharing both about a little bit about your organization and also a little bit more about your own perspective about what it means for ordinary people to achieve impact. So, I have about 10 questions to get through. We may not get through all of them in the end. We'll see how this conversation kind of pans out. For the audience that's currently watching us, like if at any time you happen to have any questions, feel free to just drop us either in the Q&A or just in the chat. Either is fine. Um, but yeah, so for the first question, Daniel kind of went into this a lot more in his own introduction, but Ivandri, like I'm actually quite curious about you. What actually got you started on your own journey of impact? Like before we get into talking more about the getting ordinary people to achieve impact, like I want to know a little bit more about your story, how this came to be.
So, okay, so basically what I done is like techie stuff for the governments in judicial area. We are helping them to digitalize their process, things like that. And my perspective about OPAI itself, that like in my presentation, is the core focus for the grassroots people that can become a change maker. That's the highlight that I seeing. And like Daniel said before, that sometimes we will came across with the condition like, okay, are we going to this kind of changing? I'm a change maker, or are the people that using my regulation will be the change maker? Or everyone is a change maker? That's lines is sometimes blue, and sometimes we tend to glorify the startup, the social enterprise that doing this kind of changing, this kind of change process that happens. But in the end, it's like a mutual process, not only that startup or social enterprises, but there are many stakeholders that making that change is happen.
All right, that's fair. Okay, so the next question I have for you guys is like something that both of you can answer. Um, I know that you kind of went into this during your presentations, but maybe just to formalize it and also so that it's easier for me to do the toolkit later. Can you tell me a little bit more about what ordinary people means to you and what achieving impact means in the context of what you described as an ordinary person? So maybe Daniel, if you're okay to go first. I know you've kind of answered it before, but maybe you can go a little bit more in detail.
Sure. I think in this case, ordinary people really means anyone, like literally anyone, which I think does not help you in making a toolkit because it's a very wide demographic. Yeah, but I would imagine that it would serve like anyone who's interested in it can use it. And in terms of achieving impact, I would say it's really in helping people contextualize what impact means to them. So it's really to give people the awareness that impact can be both small scale and large scale, where, when a lot of people think that to create an impact, I got to be like a social entrepreneur, I got to be a founder, I got to like start a huge tech startup. But that's not the case. Like you can do it where you are with what you've got. If you're a mom taking like super good care of your kids, how do you contextualize that as impact? And maybe you can package that and do it a bit better. I think that's what it means to me.
Okay, that's fair. Vandri, how about you?
And it's the same with Daniel, but I will differ a little bit that it will be everyone, but everyone that really understand about why do they doing this as a part of the course of their life, or as a part of the course of their action, in particular action. So it's not everything it can be on OPAI. Not everyone can be an OPAI, but in another perspective, everyone is also can be an OPAI. So it depends in their perspective and how they doing some things and how they doing their things in their process.
Interesting. So to you, it's really a matter of perception more than anything else.
Yes.
All right, that's a good perspective. All right, so the next question that I have is going to dig a little bit more into the assumption that we're making. Okay, we're not making any assumptions, Mike. Sorry about that, but I kind of wanted to dig into your perspectives of whether you feel or whether you have any thoughts or data around whether people are inherently looking to create an impact. Like, do you think there are people like? Do you think people in general are looking to create impact, or is this something that like just a few people are looking to do? So basically I'm asking you a question about whether you think humanity is looking to do good or not. It's not an easy question, but like you could maybe share a little bit of anecdotes or experiences based on people that you've interacted with, either on the ground or like within like positions of power, like anything you want. It'll be interesting to hear some of those anecdotes.
You want to go first, Vandri?
Okay, I will going first. So uh, it's it's a little bit tricky question, I think. So maybe in my perspective that I already helping some of the paralegals that doing a grassroots process in narcotics areas and helping some of the paralegals to done their jobs usually. And the basis of this paralegal in narcotics area in Indonesia is happened because there are an acts of inmates that get sentenced by narcotics, and then they see that if I can in my process I have a problems in my legal process. So after I get out from jail, I want to make sure that people get their rights more better, and that's really changing. So it's back again about this perspective, like when the process of people is understanding why they need to done some certain of actions, and this kind of action is bringing change for peoples, it will be change maker process. They're doing change making process. But
Interesting.
when there are lawyers that learning law and doing that as a process to get money, it will be debatable. Are they doing this as a part of the job? Are they doing this as a part of passion? Channeling their minds to changing people, to making a change.
Mm.
I think
So
that's in my perspective.
So maybe to dig into that, like some of the things that came up from your answer was that if people are presented with a situation as well as a, not say a right way, but like a way that is you can do something in order to help someone, like
Yeah.
there's a general inclination for people to actually take that particular path. And as for whether or not like a particular profession enables the whole desire to be more impactful, or whether they will use that for their personal gain, like to a large degree that's something that is very personal at the end. But I think from your response, like the initial question was like, do you feel people are inherently looking to create impact? It seems quite clear that if they are presented with either the opportunity or that clarity to of action to actually create an impact, like generally people would be drawn towards it, in your view.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. All right, Daniel, what do you think?
Simple answer is yes. I think if you look at it from a statistic perspective, you know, especially like with all those employment interviews with millennials and stuff like that, like a lot of people quote that they want to work at a place that creates a positive impact. I think if you look at that from a statistical perspective, but I think a personal opinion is that everyone wants to be somewhat the hero of the story, right? In some way. So most people assuming that they are on a moral path, so to speak, in their own context, they would not naturally want to do good things. I think there was once I saw this video on Facebook about an FBI agent, and she said something really interesting that I remember till now, that in the mind of a terrorist, they are the good guy, where even though they kill people, they believe that what they're doing is the right thing, and to them, they are creating a positive impact. So in that context, it would be where, you know, everyone does want to make a difference. It's just that it might start off with good intentions, but it can become very warped to have very bad outcomes. And that's where you get all the messed up things that we have in the world sometimes. So yes, simple answer, yes, I think everyone wants to do good.
That's fair. And I appreciated that you kind of dragged along a little bit of statistics over here. It really makes my life a bit easier. Thanks for that. So the next question that I have that I want to dig into is, okay, so now we kind of have a premise that if people are presented with the opportunity, they would probably want to do the right thing. And even if they're not presented with the opportunity, there is a outcry for them to be given the opportunity to be able to give the right thing, which is reflected in the statistics that you've mentioned. So I want to dig more into going beyond these people and more like public perception as a whole. So there's a very common notion that goes around where there's an idea that you can either do well or you can do good. Or another way to kind of look at it is that you should be doing well first before you're doing good. So let's say you are a person who already is in that mind frame of wanting to do good as an individual. So how do you then tackle this mindset that might be prevalent amongst people? Or how do you tackle something that's even harder, like apathy associated with people that don't see the point of creating a positive impact? I realized that maybe I should have given you guys the questions a little bit earlier, but yeah, okay, let's break it down first. Like, how does an ordinary person try to tackle apathy around people that may not want to achieve impact?
That's maybe there are some of articles that said that if people not get this positive vibe by themselves, it's never can be inflicted, or they never can get no, okay, there are things that really good or great in something else, in some process. So they need to feel it. They need to get, oh, I get some, it's like when you go to cashier and then you get a little bit smile and get in the end, have a good day, blah, blah, blah. But with a sincere process, it will be really different when you get from a cashier like, okay, good day, but it's like a template. The touch feeling, it's really, I think it's really important, and how to make sure that the empathy will be channeling from one person to another person.
So the main point that you're trying to bring across is that like one way to combat apathy is to somehow be able to implement a process of channeling empathy in some way or another.
Yeah.
Okay. Daniel, like what's your perspective on it?
I think it's similar to Vandri's in the sense that empathy plays an important role. But I do feel that apathy is always a product of like past experience, at least like based on, you know, people I've met and even like to some extent myself. And around like apathy, like since it's built on past experiences, it's also where people develop like certain limiting beliefs around their experiences. So like, for example, I don't care about the world because the world doesn't care about me, right? But it's really digging down and finding out like what triggers someone to think that way. Or I think one very common thing, I don't know whether like most women in the attendees can relate, is that I've met some women who say, all men are terrible. Like I've literally had one woman tell me before, like, you're a man, the only right you have is your hand. But if you speak to this person more and you wonder like why they're so aggressive about it, you find out that they've had very negative experiences with men. And in some way, I wouldn't say it validates like a generalization, but it does validate like a certain point of view. If all you know are bad men, that's what you're going to think. So I suppose it's raising the question of how do you destroy this limiting belief in the same way that you want to destroy like negative perceptions about anything else. Because I feel like those are the things that create apathy in the long run.
Fair enough. So identifying that limiting belief and then taking steps to kind of not combat it, but like address it, deconstruct it, and eventually, hopefully, overcome it. All right. And also, I'm very cognizant about the fact that it's basically 3 guys on a panel just talking about impact. Rest assured that there are 9 more sessions that are happening, and we do have female panelists that are lined up. So do bear with us on that. This was really meant to be.
This is the first one. This is the first one. So we will have a more gender balance stuff. Yeah.
All right. So I do want to dig into like just three more questions if you guys are okay with that. Okay, so the next question I have for you guys is the whole idea of whether or not, okay, so this is a new one. I did not send this to you guys, so just take your time to think about it a little bit. But something that came up during both your introductions, right, was the whole idea of not really leveling the playing field, but more like if someone was born somewhere versus someone who's born elsewhere, one person might end up being the social entrepreneur and the other person might just be doing business that like includes people inside. And that actually got me to wonder, and it's a little bit of a logical leap, so bear with me on that. But do you think, like in your personal opinions, like whether or not there are structural or systemic things that can be done in order to sort of level the playing field or being able to do like achieve some sort of impact, or whether you think that there's any necessity for like any sort of structural or systemic change at all? Because on the one hand, yes, one of the core beliefs that we have within this OPAI point of view is that anyone anywhere can be able to create an impact. But do you think that there is a need to sort of level the playing field somehow? Like I know it's a little bit of a nebulous question, just curious to know a little bit about what you guys think based on your experiences there.
Okay, Evan, since you went first just now, I will take this one first and give you some time. I think in terms of systemic changes that are required, I would say they are. I think, in this time, it's very hard to pinpoint. But my gut feeling of it is that a lot of it has to do with, the first would be accessibility, where, at least in my experience, a lot of the communities that I've met, it's just because they're not aware. They don't have equal access to things like internet, for example, to find out more things. They don't have access to a proper holistic education. That's where they lose out in language. And I feel like systemically, if those gaps in access were plugged, it would make them a lot more capable of participating at the same level. I think the other would be equity, in the sense where, as people who run social enterprises or do business, it's really up to us to set the precedent of how equitable you want to be with your beneficiary, right? It's a very fine line, beneficiary, partner, these are all like labels that get tossed around. But it's really up to you how equitable you want to be, how much effort you want to take to educate your, your communities that you work with to whatever extent you are capable. And it's not to say that it's an obligation, no one's expecting you to give like 90% of everything to them, because you got to eat too, But it's just how you structure it, like what is your intention of doing it. So I think, that's another thing that I think, if you were to address that systemically, it's just to have that conversation more between people who do this type of work. So whether it's nonprofits, like businesses, social enterprises, I think the list goes on and on. So yes, I think this is enough for Vanji to jump in.
I think I just add a little bit, because one is access informations. And then the second one is access of opportunity, because back again, that's two of most things that always glorify in our change making process. Social enterprise is also always glorified with uh, access of information and access of possibility and opportunity, to making sure that their venture is going up well. So to making sure that everyone in the same playing field is they get the right informations with the good infrastructure. And the second one is they know what kind of opportunity for themselves.
So maybe to actually summarize I would say like three main points that have like surfaced from both your answers. Like one is accessibility. Another one to a large degree is awareness as well. Like they can potentially have access, but like if they're not aware of it, then it's as good as them not having access. And finally, like that equity as well as like um more level playing field of some sort, like is something that has come up within both your points as well. And thanks for kind of taking that question, even though like that wasn't a prepared one. I kind of felt that yeah, it seemed pretty important for me to know about as well. Okay, so we have a couple more questions left. And those in the audience, if you would like, there's a Q&A button at the bottom, which I will get to immediately after I ask these final two questions. So if you want to ask anything at all, okay, maybe not anything, but anything related to what we've discussed so far, or like if you have any maybe alternative perspectives that you want to share, like the Q&A button is there for you, and we'll be very, very happy to get to them. Okay, so just wanted to ask two last things. So the first one actually is a little bit more of a localized question for you guys, and I do ask this with the full knowledge that like you are not necessarily like the expert on your entire country, and I know that, but it's still interesting to kind of dig into your perspective of within your own countries. What are some areas in which you kind of feel that there's a like that there's a certain urgency to it, which you wished more people would actually try to address or try to achieve an impact in those areas? Like, where do you think people should be mobilized to? If your answer is basically like there isn't any specific issue, like that's completely cool too. Just wanted to put that out there.
Well, I wouldn't say that there's no specific issue. It's that there are many issues. But I think in the context of Malaysia, I mean, one thing that you can see as of late is really like our political stability. And I think one thing that would be great, and I think it's a great example of ordinary people achieving impact, is finding a way to participate in some way in politics in a healthier way. So I think a good example is back in 2018, I think a record number of people came out to vote, and that allowed us to change our government. But you know, in the local context, we have like a backdoor government now that just popped up. I mean, I don't have any like political views that I want to bring into this, but it's just you know, people being able to participate in a way to keep our government accountable and to really like make sure like due processes are done. I think that's one way and one area.
All right, Vanji, how about you?
Okay,
Not sure
little
what
bit.
happened there.
Yeah, I just
There, there
yeah,
was a little bit of glitch, I guess.
yeah, a little
So,
bit glitch. Really
sorry about
sorry.
that, guys.
So I think the particular area maybe in Indonesia is about poverty. I think that's things that we need to mobilize more people to reduction for poverty is really sensitive things. After the COVID-19 is it's like, you know, employment unemployment rate is hiking, many people is getting laid off, things like that. So uh, that's the area that I think it's need more people to doing some things or doing change in that place. But yeah, in the end, problem is so many. So uh, in another area, in another place, we always want to have people to making some change, making some impact. But yeah, I think the poverty area is more crucial right now.
Yeah, that's fair. And it is a big one for sure. And I would say that like of all the questions that I've asked tonight, like this is something that I'm gonna continue asking for the rest of the panels, particularly because it will be interesting to see from a more international perspective, like what people's what are the situations like in different countries as well. Yeah. So with that, like I have one last one that is directly related to what we're trying to do over here. It's a very short one. I'm not sure whether it's super simple to answer, but let's try it anyway. Um, yeah. With all that you've said and with all that we've discussed tonight, what are your hopes for OPAI as a concept and eventually as a toolkit?
My hope is it can be used by everyone. It's simple and can bring more impact for our society. That's what I hope in this platform.
All right, so simple and usable. Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, I think definitely usable for the right demographic. I think the last thing I'd like to see it become is, one of those other like almost biblical level texts that only a very particular group of people understand. So definitely simple and usable. I think I'd also like it, to be able to change people's mindsets about like what it means to achieve impact. I think that's something I really like to see.
So I'm not sure whether to ask this slight follow up here. Um, I mean it is a pretty small group, so like if you don't mind me asking, right? What to you represents like a like biblical level sort of text within the social impact space that like, while is important, is something that is a little bit dense and not so easy to understand.
Hmm. Well, I think there are. If you just try googling something along the lines of like uh, working is like indicators of good housing, for example, on Google, it brings you to all sorts of articles. But honestly, if you don't have a PhD, you're not going to understand like what's going on. Like in terms of the way they explain it, the kind of jargon they use, the type of language, the amount of assumptions that is made in the text. Yeah, I really use that as an example. Although I understand like it's an academic example, but yeah, I think maybe that's what I mean. Like I wouldn't want it to be like super academic, I guess.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. So basically avoiding this thing that we're trying to create together with all the different panelists as we move forward, trying to avoid it being too academic in nature is something that we would collectively want to achieve over here. All
Maybe
right, cool.
I want to add a little bit because it's not only happen in social impact area that there are so many jargon abbreviative, yeah, even that we never know, and it's also happened in many playing fields. That's that kind of jargons that making us really special when you already like in law there are so many jargon that many people is don't understand. Even for a lawyer that not focus in criminal area, but you focus in civil, you will don't know many jargon in outside of their place. So it's part of like making sure that everyone is understand something. But in another hand, this kind of jargon is like uh, a barrier, and it's part of like making sure that you are in some sort of communities. But yeah, back again, we need to making sure that it's not too academic or too many abbreviations.
Sure. And especially because this document is going to be used as a introduction to impacts of sorts. So the best way that we can sort of do that is to make sure that it is as simple to understand as possible, as actionable as possible. And maybe if they want to engage in that higher level of complexity, that's really something that they can do as they move forward. But the best way to democratize impact or democratize the ability to make impact is to make that initial entry point as simple as possible. Okay, so it's interesting because like that's my last question, but on the topic of like different texts or books and stuff like that. So we do have one question. We have a couple of questions on the ground, but the first one I'm going to ask is actually directly related to that initial point about like resources and stuff. For the both of you, and maybe I'll think about this answer as well because I do have a few. Can you name one book, or maybe we can expand that, like one source of information that has made a huge impact to your philosophy as a change maker?
I will go with Simon Sinek. Start with why. That's really become a benchmark for my process. And all the books, Leader It Last, and the new one is, oh, I forget the name, is blah blah blah, Infinite Games. Yeah, it's really giving more perspective. And maybe the Peter Thiel book is really good, 0 to 1.
0 to 1.
Yes, it's really nice also. That's but yeah, 0 to 1 is, it's more startup style books, so it's not really change making. But there are some of sort items that change making is put in this 0 to 1 book.
Daniel, how about you? And there's actually a like wider question, a follow-up question that actually widens the scope. Like for those that are not too fond of reading, like is there a show, influencer, public figure, political belief that has affected your ideas related to OPAI? You can answer both.
Yeah, do you wanna answer the second part first, Vandri, before coming to me?
The Simon Sinek video is really interesting. That's already there, and then some of video in TEDx is also nice. Please go to TED. And the next one is maybe read some books about socialism. Then because I am in Indonesia, I cannot go to more leftist. So we will stick in the socialism, but yeah, Marx is really nice. Please read Das Kapital 1, 2, 3. It's really proof capitalism is right, not communism.
All right, then. Oh, we have a comment. Okay, blueprint. Oh damn! I'm gonna check that out. Thanks for the recommendation. Okay, Daniel, what about you?
Yep. For me, for books, I think 0 to 1 was very influential to me. I read it when I was just out of university. It really inspired me and about creating things that are valuable. But one book on top of that I stacked my understanding of was this book by Dave Patel. It's called The History of the World Through 7 Cheap Things. So it talks about how the foundation of our world today is built around the cheapening of things like labor, of capital, of nature. And it really helped me piece everything together and understand like the world more holistically, and the way that it covers how we tell the story of, you know, Christopher Columbus, colonialism. I felt like that was a very powerful book for me. In terms of for the people who are not so fond of reading, one show that was very influential on me was Avatar: The Last Airbender. I think that was a series that I really liked. I still rewatch it sometimes. I feel like there's a lot of principles in there that were very applicable when I was a kid, and that are still very applicable today. I still draw a lot of inspiration from it. So yeah, if you haven't checked it out, I would check it out. Thanks for the question.
So maybe to talk a little bit more about the resources that okay, so for I'm gonna share a link to an Airtable that I keep by, oh wait, wrong link. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, you won't be able to access the first link, you will be able to access the second link. But essentially, for me, I'm basically someone that's a bit lazy to read, and as a result, like I just pump in information based on podcasts, and I don't have a favorite one. Okay, if there's one that I would say is my favorite, is the Y Combinator podcast, and it's really because of the diversity of voices that kind of comes out of it. But I do recognize that it is not it is something where they are celebrating founders as opposed to like trying to get everyone involved in the whole process of change making. So I think as a very interesting flip side to that, like one podcast that I do like to listen to is called the Indie Hackers podcast. It may not necessarily be related to impact, but the whole philosophy change between Y Combinator and Indie Hackers is such that one thinks about, okay, so how can a small crack team actually lead people to actually build billion-dollar companies, whereas the other one thinks about, okay, so how can I as an individual start something, create a software as a service business, kind of keep it running, and like how can I continue doing different things as and when, and like they value not just the billion-dollar businesses but also like the little things. Have a specific label of, do I listen to this on a regular basis? If it's a yes, it's really, really damn good. But as for books, what I would say is one thing that has impacted me quite a bit is me about that is within an organization, or even if you're leading a small team, basically everything you do is essentially who you are and who your team is going to be. And that's something that as much as it makes complete logical sense, like it's something that I really try to do every day, and I do think that it is more widely applicable, especially when we're talking about impact, when we like as our individual actions are going to add up, and hopefully like with our individual actions coming together, that's something that would actually be like individually impactful over a sustained period, but also like collectively impactful as well. So yeah, that's something that has really resonated with me quite strongly. All right, so I know I kind of rambled a little bit more there, and we do not have any more questions in the Q&A. This isn't going to be the last session. There's going to be more. You're going to get sick of seeing us after 10 sessions. But yeah, so I hope this was a good kickoff session. We will be, especially since you guys signed up for this talk in the first place, we will be giving more information about the next session. It's not just going to be the three of us anymore. And we'll also keep you guys posted on the progress of the toolkit that we're actually creating. Yep. So with that, thanks so much to everyone for your time to attend this. Before we end, like any last things, Daniel, Evandri, that you want to say?
I'd just like to say thank you for spending your time with us, especially coming to something that is very new. And I think like everyone in the chat is someone I know in some way. So it's nice to see everyone here. So thank you for your support, and I hope to see you again.
Badri? I think he lagged out.
Yeah, I think he's frozen.
Oh my god, he didn't just freeze, he just disappeared. Alrighty, so I think with that, we can end this session right now. Thanks again, guys, for attending, and yeah, we hope to see you all soon. Thank you.